I'm going to talk about trans fatty acids in takeaway food. This is a sub-study of part of a much bigger study that we did, a funded study here, which I'll explain a little bit later towards the end. But anyway, for those who don't know, trans fatty acids are part of our diet, and they come in three main forms. A natural form, which consists of ruminant trans fatty acids. These are from animal meat, such as beef and lamb. And we've got also CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, also found naturally in things like cheese and milk. And then we've got industrial hydrogenation, which creates the artificial, if you like, fatty acids. And there's a chemical structures here for those who are a bit more chemically oriented. And you can see we've got a leidic acid. That top one is the industrial trans fatty acid, and you can see it's a linear trans fatty acid, which means it can be packed into things like spreads and margarines, and that's why they were created, was to give substitute for saturated fatty acids, because they behave in a similar way chemically. However, evidence, very, very strong, convincing evidence, there is association with coronary heart disease with industrial trans fatty acids. And this is pretty much undisputed now. But with respect to the ruminant trans fatty acids and the CLA, the evidence is somewhat controversial. But saying this, recent meta-analysis by Brower in 2010 have shown there's a strong association no matter what trans fatty acid, so whether it's ruminant, CLA or industrial, and the ratio of LDL to HDL cholesterol. Apologise if those fonts are a little bit small, I can see some of you straining your eyes there. So there's a linear link with, as the percentage of trans fatty acids, regardless of source, goes up, then the change in LDL to HDL cholesterol also goes up, which is a marker, LDL to HDL cholesterol is a marker of cardiovascular disease. And more recent evidence in 2012 by a Norwegian group have shown a direct association with ruminant trans fatty acids and cardiovascular disease. So this would be endpoint cardiovascular disease, an actual event, whether it's a heart attack or a death, in women only, and I'm not sure why that association isn't there with men. In 2007, the Scientific Association Committee for Nutrition showed that the evidence for trans fatty acids and coronary heart disease was very convincing. However, they don't differentiate between the ruminant, the industrial and the CLA because of the insufficient evidence around the ruminant and the CLA. And they've given figures, I'll talk about the figures later, the cut-off points. We wanted to look at the level of trans fatty acids in takeaway food because there's an intake in the trend of eating out of the home over the last few years. And the Food Standards Agency conducted a survey in 2007 and found 22% of the population eats takeaway once a week. So reasonably high, 1 in 5 eat takeaways once a week. However, that survey has not been conducted within subpopulations as well, so it doesn't really show areas of deprivation. And there's not many surveys out there in the UK that have really looked at the intake, the frequency of intake, how much people are taking. But nevertheless, we've got a hypothesis that intake could be higher in certain areas than others. Therefore, we wanted to look at the nutrition in all of the nutrition within takeaway foods. We know from other studies that have looked at fast food, which comprise takeaway food as well. And this doesn't differentiate between the fast food chains such as McDonald's, KFC, etc. We wanted to look at takeaway food just from independent outlets. But anyway, fast food has been shown to be high in trans fatty acids and other problems as well, such as high in sodium, sugar, saturated fatty acids, high in energy, portion sizes, just to name a few things. I should also mention trans fatty acids are also associated with other conditions that relate to heart disease, such as insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes and obesity. However, the evidence isn't quite as strong for coronary heart disease than it is for coronary heart disease. So there's no previous evidence in the UK of the levels of trans fatty acids in takeaway food from independent outlets. We only know of 1 or 2 studies in Australia that have done similar kind of work. So we wanted to do this in the UK. So we took samples from chip shops, pizza outlets, Chinese and Indian. What else have I got? Yeah, I think I've covered everything. From those small independent restaurants, whether people bought it there on the premises or whether they have it delivered, it didn't make any difference. And the aims were to analyse them for trans fatty acids, amongst other things, but I'm only presenting trans fatty acids today because I'd be here all day with the amount of analysis we've got on them. I want to show how much trans fatty acids are there per meal and per 100 gram. Compare this to the UK recommendations, which is no more than 5 grams per day. That works out, on average, if the consumption is about 2,000 kcal per day, calories per day, it works out about 5 grams of trans fatty acids are the cut-off of UK recommendations. Interestingly, Denmark have done a lot more in trans fatty acids, and they've got a ban on particular oils and fats. They've got more than 2% of trans fats in. So I also wanted to compare the takeaway food to the Danish ban. And I also wanted to make some rather hypothetical predictions of risk towards the end. They're very hypothetical because I need some more data to make any more sort of concrete predictions. The methods we used were in conjunction, we worked in conjunction with Wirral Borough Council, Knowsley Council. I haven't got it in this slide, but we did work with Liverpool City Council as well, but not for trans fats. This was part of a different project. And the overall project is, as I said, to look at the overall nutrition, but this particular presentation is only focusing on trans fatty acids. Reasonable sample size of 265 takeaway foods, and we categorised them into 5 main categories of Chinese, Indian, English, pizza, and I forgot to mention kebab meals earlier on. And within each of those categories we can see a list of different types of meals. I mean, I won't go through them all, but Chinese, beef green pepper, chicken chow mein was another one. We've got Indian with korma, vegetable biryani. English, fish and chips, obviously. We had chicken nuggets and chips as well. And you can see some others there. Kebabs, we only had 2 different types, doner kebab and doner kebabs with chips. Which we think is probably quite popular, especially on a Friday or Saturday night in town. Interestingly, the sample for the doners were only the regular size. So we've only got information on the regular, not the large. So keep that in mind when you see some of the results. Analysis was done by Eurofins, which are a food analysis group, accredited, I should say. So the results come back there are very accurate, we hope. Although there's 1 or 2, I think, that might not be quite so accurate. And they use gas chromatography. Don't ask me the detail of the method because they did that. I need to find that out. Okay, so moving on to the results. On the left, we've got the main categories, the type of takeaway food, and the trans fatty acids per 100 gram. On the right, same again, except this is per the whole meal. So what we can see standing out quite a mile are kebab meals. Funny enough, they were the smallest portion as well. So, we've got Kebab meals showing the highest amount of trans fatty acids, whether we looked at this per meal or per 100 gram. And then pizza come in a second. I wouldn't say a close second though. It's quite a bit of a difference. English were the lowest, but I've purposely left the outliers in this graph because we can see a huge outlier up there for fish and chips. That was. As I say, Eurofins did the analysis. Whether that's a methodological error or whether it's real, we don't know. I suspect it could be real. I'll explain in my discussion. So anyway, kebabs significantly different from all the other different meal types, and we got some significant differences within other categories as well. Quite a large range of results. Even looking at kebabs, we can see, anywhere from just under 2, probably about 1.7 grams, and I think the top end was 5.8 grams for one kebab. Considering 5 grams is the cut-off point for the recommendations, it's exceeded those recommendations. When I looked at the trans fatty acids as a percentage of this 5 gram recommendation, again we can see kebabs showing the highest amount in comparison. And of course we've got our outlier for fish and chips again. Interestingly, when comparing to the Danish recommendations of 2%, we can see all kebab meals were over this 2%, but there's possibly a reason for that one. Highs and lows, I'll quickly go through this slide because I wanted to point out the fish and chips as being the highest amount of trans fatty acids. We've got some lows in there. From the Indian type meal showed the lowest types quite consistently of trans fatty acids. Fish and chips, pizza and the doner kebab are our main kind of discussion points. So to finish off, as I mentioned, fish and chips were the highest at 9.3 grams of the one particular meal. That could be down to some cooking practices. I've looked at the research, overcooking oil and heating oil. Some evidence says that doesn't create trans fatty acids. However, some other evidence does. And I know through kind of anecdotal evidence from our collaborators that some of the outlets reheat the oil. And when they're asked how often do they change the oil, they say, what do you mean? They don't change the oil. So that could be a reason. We still need some more evidence on the ruminant and the conjugated linoleic acid because we suspect that kebab meat is rather natural sources. As kebab meat tends to be lamb and beef, it's probably going to be ruminant, although we just don't know because we only looked at the total trans fatty acids. So further studies would be needed to sort of differentiate between those. However, the question begs, does it really matter if the risk increases regardless of what type of trans fatty acid? Our Indian meals were consistently low. However, when we look at the overall picture, I'll just put my final conclusion on. All takeaway meals that we've sampled have shown to be high in energy. We've got a variety of salt. We published a paper on salt not so long ago. Again, very, very high levels of salt in some of the meals, up to 25 grams. I think some was even 27 grams of salt in one meal. I've got a sugars abstract I've just written with up to 158 grams of sugar in some takeaway meals, and another on saturated fatty acids. Haven't got the details, but again, quite high. So even though the Indians were low in trans fatty acids, they're going to be high in something else. So the overall message is that takeaway foods aren't particularly that good. So what are we going to do about it? We've started doing something about it from the Eatright project, which was with Liverpool City Council. We managed to get 220,000, a relatively large grant from them, to do a reformulations project. And we've reformulated quite a lot of those takeaway meals to have lower salt, lower fat, lower saturates, lower sugar, etc. And we've done the taste testing, proper sensory testing on those, and largely they're on par with the original meal. Some of them are better, some of them are worse, but largely on par with the sensory panels. The aim of the councils were to take those reformulated meals into several outlets around Liverpool, and then they get an Eatright award for selling the Eatright meals. That's still in progress yet. I need to get an update from Liverpool City Council to see where they are, but I know there's quite a few of them are on board, and then we retest again at the end to see if they've complied with our reformulations. The other project we've got going, am I okay for? No. Quickly, just so you all do this next week, because we're going to send out a live questionnaire around John Moore's. I would encourage everyone to fill this in, but it's on an intake, frequency, socioeconomic class, all those kind of things. Short questionnaire, he says 40 questions long, but please fill in and send on to other people if you would. And I'll leave it at that for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Ian, thanks very much. If I might, I'll start off with a question.
Of course, yes.
Do you think there's any need for legislation here to govern the industry?
If
you look at America, a number of the cities there and states have said absolute blanket ban on trans fatty acids.
I really think, well, from the trans fatty acids, they weren't as bad as I thought. You'd need to have several takeaways a week to get over that 5 grams per day, because a recent study in the UK have shown intake is quite low. But that study didn't look at subpopulations, they didn't look at takeaway food. So until we get the evidence back from the subpopulations, I'll kind of stay on the fence with that one. Probably though, very probably. Things have been done. In the UK we've had voluntarily the industry have reduced trans fatty acid, and it has had an impact. So I think the takeaways are using some of those newer oils. However, it's the heating processes I'm still not quite sure of. Yeah. Because
that reheating does create
it probably does, although some of the lab experiments have shown it doesn't, but I don't think they've been quite as severe enough as the takeaways are. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Ian, I'm just wondering, you mentioned deprived populations, but you didn't really go into much detail. What's
No.
the hypothesis in relation to that?
There is some evidence in Australia that the deprived populations are consuming more takeaway per week than that original survey I said, about 22%. We don't know much in the UK at the moment. There's some evidence from Glasgow that there was no relationship with deprived areas. I don't really think I believe that though. The Australian study said there was quite a strong relationship with trans fats intake because of the amount of takeaways. I hypothesise certain parts of Liverpool it'd be anywhere up to daily intakes, and if there was daily intake of the fish and chips and some of the kebab meals there, they really are going to hit over that 5 gram target, and it's going to send their LDL to HDL cholesterol going upwards and their risk. That's just outside of any obesity problems as well.
How much depends on where they source their ingredients, these
yeah, we do have.
Depends on where they cook.
Yeah, we do have some evidence from the Eatright project of where they get their bulk ingredients from, and we were trying to keep a tally of what oils they were using, and they would just be buying the cheapest versions they could get on a monthly basis, so it might change. The manufacturer might change monthly. The council were collecting that data, and in the end they said they couldn't detect where the oils were from because they kept them in different vats and things, so it's quite hard to find out where those original ingredients are from. But it's a valid question. We need to know that. I'd like to really look at a detailed analysis of what those oils are.
One of the things with this, I guess, I'm coming from a health promotion perspective, and I think it is certainly speaking as someone that's out on a Friday or Saturday night,
Yeah.
you know, at the end of the night, that is all that's available. And that's one of the issues, I think. And
Yeah.
I just wondered if you know if there's, I mean, I've certainly been in obesity meetings with the council and PCT.
Yeah.
It's quite frustrating because you've got the transport department, the planning, I don't even know what department it was, but there was one department that were very keen on it. They were like, absolutely no way are we going to stop there being any more takeaways, because it was a real business.
Yeah.
Brought in the money for them, and I just wondered if there's any kind of discussions about plans for any healthier takeaways being available, because I think people would use them and it'd be interesting.
I don't know if there's any plans to do this, but it'd be certainly a good idea to do so. And I know there's been some areas of banned takeaway foods within certain perimeter of schools as well, because school kids tend to go for the sort of takeaway food a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, I'd be all for the healthier versions, but I don't know if there's any plans to do that.
Maybe it's a project.
Maybe it's a project, exactly. We need funding to do that. Yeah.
It seems a bit odd actually trying to import a Scottish idea when we're talking about health and nutrition. But I had a student in Edinburgh, it was spodulike.
Right.
That's what people had, and it was baked potatoes on the way home.
Yeah.
I think Liverpool particularly.
Yeah.
Really, really popular and cheap.
Bagels.
Yeah. Just one final point before we move on. One of the biggest growth industries is around the provision in supermarkets of ready-cooked meals.
Yes.
Now, I'd imagine that salt is probably a major issue with that, but is there any evidence that they also suffer from similar?
We've done the studies, we've compared the ready meals versus the takeaway food, and while they are still relatively high, they are much better than the outlets.
Much higher than a home cooked?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, still higher than a home cooked. Yeah, well, yeah. But the ready meals are they're still much better, even if you compare it per 100 gram, because they are the small in portions. But when you compare per 100 gram, they are. So we've got that evidence as well. At some point, we've presented that at Nutrition Society, but it should turn into a full paper or part of a full paper.
Right, thank you very much, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.